This video was supposed to be a no-sleep video, but because I didn't like many of the stories, but one, I had to make it a let's not meet video. This one story I liked so much though, I had to include it. But in order for you not to get confused and think it was true, as the rest of the stories are, I had to create this intro to it. Anyway, the no-sleep story will be first. I hope you enjoyed the video. Since I was a child, I have been captivated by violins. Last night, as I drove home from work, I could feel the energy from the looming thunderstorm, and knew it was time to play my First Symphony. Since my wife shared my musical interest, she was thrilled and said that she would decide which neighbors would join us for the performance. When I arrived home, I was greeted by my loving wife, and we had our usual embrace. Not a minute later, the delivery man arrived with our wonderful dinner. My wife had surprised me with my favorite dish from my favorite restaurant. Well, at least it is my favorite restaurant that delivers. As we were finishing our delicious meal, my wife stomped on the floor as she stood up, anticipating the arrival of our neighbors. Upon hearing the familiar knock on our door, I grabbed my conductor's baton as my wife opened the door and seated our guests. As I entered our living room, my wife recommended that our neighbors could do the violins part because, in her estimation, it looked like they were quite capable of it this evening. I eagerly agreed with her shrewd suggestion, which freed up my attention to focus on conducting them to go along with the storm. The syncopated pitter-patter of raindrops overhead provided the perfect percussion, while the romantic roars of thunder maintained a steady brass section. As the moment arrived for the violins to join in, I placed my arms in the air and swung my baton with all my might. Our guests responded well to our special brand of violins, and the music that emerged from them was truly beautiful. It was the kind of music where you can feel the emotion behind it, as if the sound they created was an extension of themselves. While the symphony continued, I forcefully moved my baton to keep the orchestra playing as if my life depended on it. The musicians howled as if their lives depended on it as well. Nearly 20 minutes had passed, but we pressed on, determined to finish the performance. Only once did I look away from the musicians, to glance at my wife. She was beaming with a radiant smile and swaying along to the rhythm of the symphony. As the final note from the piece rang out, we heard a loud thud. One of our neighbors had collapsed to the floor. Poor fellow, I thought. This performance must have demanded more than he could handle. I bent over and helped him up. With a weary smile, I ushered him and the other guests out the door while congratulating them on a fantastic job. My wife promptly locked the basement door and placed my conductor's baton back with the other butcher knives. Afterwards, she nestled alongside me on the couch and said, "How about we do another symphony next week? Although, I would prefer if we did something other than your First Symphony, since we do that piece all the time." My first job, I worked part-time at a mom-and-pop pizza as a delivery driver and dishwasher. The shop is within walking distance of my apartment, which I just got alone. The shop is owned by a foreign man and his two nephews, and another friend of theirs. I was the only female in the entire building. At first, the owner asked me to change into my work shirt the first day, in the walk-in freezer. I declined and put it on in the bathroom. He supervised me delivering pizzas, and put his arm around my chair, and told me to join him and the workers after work for drinks. I politely declined. I wasn't even old enough to drink. He asked if I had a boyfriend, which I did at the time, and I told him yes. He lived in another state. He then offered his worker to sleep on my couch because he didn't have a place to stay. Without consulting me, I obviously protested and declined. He also told me that he knew my boyfriend's name, which he did, which I never told him. As time went on, things got weirder. The owner would take me out back, where there were no cameras, and scold me for not pouring bleach into the dishes I was washing. I told him that you can't stick your hands into bleach, but he didn't care. He would take me out back after my shift and compliment my eyeglasses and tell me how beautiful I was. I would say thanks, back away, and drive home every time. He came up behind me as I was washing dishes and blew on the back of my neck, and then proceeded to tell me that since I live alone, I did not inform him of this, that I should be careful. He then stated that he knew the exact layout of the apartment because his friend lives there. I told him I had a male roommate. I didn't, and he chuckles and told me I did not, and he was going to break into my apartment. I was stunned and had 4 deliveries waiting for me to drop them off. On the way out the door, his nephew muttered something about me being a girl. I threw the pizza bags into the car and promptly pulled over, had a panic attack, and dropped all 5 pizzas and whatever else I was delivering at the very first house, and didn't give a shit. I went home to my apartment, called my mom, and sat in the kitchen with a hammer. Someone was knocking on my front door, but I didn't look to see who. I already had a feeling. Then, the pizza shop called me repeatedly. I left my eyeglasses in the shop, and had their pizza bags. My dad went into the store, took the pizza bags back, and threatened the owner, saying he has no problem going back to jail. My dad brought back my glasses. Months later, I ran into the nephew at my college campus, and he proceeded to make unending, uncomfortable eye contact until we passed each other. After the incidents, I got a huge 100-pound American bulldog that kept me safe until the day she died. The pizza shop is still open for business, and I'm still living in my apartment. Haven't heard a thing since. Creepy pizza guy and your creepy nephews. Let's not meet ever again. This happened in October 2015. I'm a 26-year-old female. My boyfriend and I were driving back to Virginia from our trip to Acadia National in Maine. I don't have a valid license, so my boyfriend had to drive the entire trip. At some point in Connecticut, my boyfriend became very tired as it was getting very late. We had spent so much money during our trip that we decided to find a cheap place to stay for a few hours before getting back to our trip home. We found a place in Bridgeport, Connecticut, called Sunnyside Inn, or Motel, something of that nature. It seemed a little sketchy, but we were desperate and it was only $88 a night. Cheap and easy. We should have been warned by the fact that the clerk was behind bulletproof glass, but again, we were desperate. Wanting something to eat, we walked across the street to the Good Bazaar. As we were walking back, we noticed a new car in the small parking lot, 2 spots over from ours. My boyfriend, being the protective man he is, has me walk close to him as we approached his car to get his knife for protection. For those of you who don't know, Bridgeport was once one of the highest murder capitals of the US. We started walking up the stairs to the 2nd floor towards our room. A large man got out of the new car and began following us, but with a distance. My boyfriend had me walk ahead of him and race to the room. We got in, locked the door, and placed a small table against it. The room was a wreck. The mattress folded in half when we sat on it. Tiles in the bathroom were falling off the walls. The chain on the door was removed, and there was a large odor of cigarette smoke wafting through the vents, despite being smoke-free rooms. My boyfriend decided to look up this place online. He found all negative reviews, some with photos of doors with bullet holes, dirty underwear on the beds, and one review saying they found blood in their room. Since we were already there and very exhausted, we decided to try and get some rest, then leave early. A while went by. We ate, watched Netflix, and tried to sleep. I fell asleep for a while, but my boyfriend never fell asleep. Around 6 a.m., the phone rang. My boyfriend picked up and all he heard was a heavy breathing on the other end. He asked who it was, but they never replied. Then they hung up. He woke me up and we booked it out of there. Never even checked out at the front desk. So, heavy breather? Let's not meet. This happened a few years ago, the summer before my senior year in high school. I was dating this huge asshole at the time named Eric. He barely ever let me into his house, never let me meet any of his friends, got upset if I even spoke to other guys. General shitty boyfriend things. I have terrible anxiety, to the point where I start to panic when strangers pay attention to me for more than a passing glance. And Eric loved drawing attention to us just to make me anxious. This comes into play in a moment. One night, I was out late with Eric, aimlessly driving from place to place and talking. I had him driving my SUV because I didn't feel like driving that day, and it was a much cleaner car than his was. Around about 3 a.m., he had parked in the middle of a shopping center lot, and we were just talking about random shit. The shopping center was relatively small and somewhat poorly lit. There was absolutely no one around aside from a man sitting in the shadows in front of one of the shops that I hadn't even noticed until Eric pointed him out to me. "What do you think he would do if I honked?" he asked. One of his favorite ways of making me anxious was honking at people just so they would look at us. I asked him not to, but of course he did anyway. I watched the figure of the man across the parking lot stand up from the curb and walk toward my car. I told Eric to drive away, but he just watched the man walk towards us in silence. The closer the man got, the louder my command to leave became. The man walked to the side of my car and opened the door to the back seat. My heart jumped into my throat, and the dumbass next to me hadn't locked the door and still wasn't driving away. At this point I was shouting at Eric to drive away, and now he finally did, jerking the door handle out of the man's hand. He drove with the door still ajar for about 30 feet before stopping so that I could crawl into the back seat and close it. After that, I didn't let Eric drive anymore, and broke things off with him 2 or 3 months later. I always lock my car doors now, no matter where I am or what I'm doing. I don't know why that man thought he could get into my car, or what he would have done if he actually had. I was around 16 or 17 years old when this happened. I'm 28 now. For some context, I was a poor high school student studying in a town located around 300 kilometers from my home. Back then, I lived in rural Moldavian Republic and studied in Romania, where I had a scholarship to cover most of my expenses. Now back to the story. After winter vacation had ended, I was returning from home by train. Now the train station was a really desolated place. There weren't any apartment buildings for almost a 1 kilometer radius or so. The train arrived at 11 p.m., and the buses circulated until around 11 p.m. This was Romania, so no actual reliable schedule. I was alone, and there was a significant walking distance from the train station to my high school campus and dorm, but taking a taxi was far too expensive for me back then, and I didn't want to bother any of my friends or colleagues. So the stupid teenager I was proceeds to think I can simply walk to the nearest bus station, and if I'm lucky I'll get a bus. If not, then I'll just walk to the campus, which would be about an hour. I got out of the train and it was a cold, dark night. The area around the train station was completely desolated, except for a few Romani shacks, gypsies, if you're more familiar with this term, scattered around. I proceed to start walking toward the campus. After a few minutes I think I hear something behind me, and I get a dreadful feeling. I ignore it and start walking faster. A few more seconds pass, and I can hear someone calling me in a raspy voice. "Hey, beauty! Why in such a hurry? Wait for me!" I'm really creeped out, but I can't find the courage to look behind me, so I start walking even faster. The guy behind me keeps up. I can now hear his footsteps. I get scared and proceed to walk the fastest I can without actually running. I hear him behind me. "Now that's not nice! Where do you think you're going?" I turn my head and see a dirty, shaggy man looking in his 30s. At this point I'm really scared, beyond trying to keep my calm scared. The area around me is pitch black and silent. There are no houses, no people, and even no streets that have any traffic around. And I don't have a cell phone. This happened more than 10 years ago in Romania, and I was poor. I proceed to run. I run as fast as I can towards the nearest populated, circulated street I can think of. I can hear him running behind me, not only keeping up, but catching up on me. I reach the nearest circulated street, and he is 2 steps behind me, yelling angrily. "Where do you think you're going?" 2 seconds pass by, and I see a small bus passing by. I was nowhere near a bus station, but I started moving my hands and gesturing frantically, trying to get the bus driver to stop. Happily, he noticed me, stopped, and just as I closed the door, still panicking, I see the guy grabbing at the door, trying to open it. Too late. The bus starts moving away. I thank the bus driver profusely. He said he noticed the guy running behind me and that I was in panic, and that's why he stopped. I am not a religious person, but damn, it felt like someone was looking after me and sent the bus in the nick of time to save me. Hey, I wasn't going to make an outro for this video, but I decided, why the hell not? I'm not sure how many of you even get this far, but whatever, I like making them, so I'll keep on. These stories were pretty odd though, huh? I hope you enjoyed them. By the way, speaking of stories in my channel, I'm not sure when, but sometime soon, I may start creating the other videos I had in mind. I don't want to say what they are yet though, It's a surprise. Skoko! Hey, did I get your attention? Good. I'm sure I pronounced your name right. Anyway, I just want to say thank you very much for your kind messages. You have no idea how much they encourage me to hurry up and get this video out. If I have more viewers like you, any amount of tedium and effort will always be worth it. Thanks for caring. Skoko, if it's fear you're after, welcome home.